You are listening to the Devoted Dreamers podcast, and I'm your host, Merritt Ansel. I believe God has an unfolding plan for your life, a God-shaped dream just for you. But so much gets in the way, right? Fear, comparison, imposter syndrome. What if I mess this up? You are not alone in those feelings, and I'm so glad you're here for Season 8. Keep listening to gain some transformational tools that will help you release the lies so that you can freely show up in the world, offering your gifts, leaning on God in your weaknesses, and serving His kingdom with the dream He's given you. Hey dreamers, you're listening to episode 183. I've got an interview for you this week, the first one of the new year, 2021. I'm talking with Hannah Brencher. She's an author, blogger, TED speaker, and entrepreneur. She's founder of The World Needs More Love Letters, which is a global community dedicated to sending letter bundles to those who need encouragement. She's been named one of the White House's Women Working to Do Good and has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Oprah, Glamour, USAtoday.com, the Chicago Tribune, and more. She's written a new book called Fighting Forward, which recently launched into the world just last week. It is composed of hope-filled truths and affirmations she calls her fight songs, which are meant to encourage showing up, claiming hope, and taking back your life one small win at a time. I feel like this conversation with Hannah is perfectly timed for us dreamers here in the new year, especially after the 2020 we all had. I think you're really going to appreciate hearing from her. In fact, I hope you'll come away with some nuggets to chew on, like how you can create some daily rhythms for yourself that will actually help you make time for your dream. I know a lot of us struggle with that. I hear that from you often. So Hannah also has a free resource to help us time-challenged folks. So listen for her talking about that. She shares about the benefits of getting started in your dream just 15 minutes at a time. Doesn't that make that sound like a little bit more doable? 15 minutes at a time. And then ventures into a conversation about how failure can be an essential aspect of the growth process. So it's not something that we actually need to fear. It's something we should be open-armed to. So anyway, there's some great nuggets in this conversation. I can't wait for you to meet her. Here she is, Hannah Brencher. Hey, Devoted Dreamers, happy January. It is finally 2021, and this is going to be a really fun conversation today. I got introduced to Hannah Brencher back at the end of last year, and she has a book that has just come out called Fighting Forward, and she's coming to share her story with us today. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so fun. I really connect with your message, and I'm certain that the listener will as well. So actually, let's just talk about your book. We're recording this in advance of your book launch, but everyone listening is going to be in a world where the book is already out. So how excited are you?
I'm excited. It's like you're always a little bit nervous when you're launching a book out into the world, but I know what's in this book. I know what I packed in there for the reader. And I wrote this book entirely for the reader. And so I'm excited for people to get their hands on this. And I'm just excited for what God wants to do through this book. And mostly excited that hopefully these messages would inspire people to put the book down and go out and really live and be present in their lives. That would be the biggest win of all.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I want for the listener, to go out and be present in your life and what God's given you to do. Because we only get one life. So tell us, would you describe kind of what a God-shaped dream has looked like for you kind of up till this point, and then maybe what He's showing you is next?
Yeah. So I feel like in a lot of ways I've been living this God-shaped dream, which I'm so thankful for. But I also can look back and realize that God was faithful to give me the vision, but it's only a vision if you don't, it stays a vision if you don't start laying the bricks, And so for a long time, the only dream that I had was that I was going to be a writer. I've had that dream since I was 6 years old. It's all I ever wanted. And So I'm so thankful to be in this space where I do get to write and I do get to do this full time. I remember just graduating from college and I was working at a job that I thought was like a dream job in New York City. And it did not turn out to be that way at all. And I'm still like thankful I stuck with the job and, got the experience. But I remember calling my mom on the phone one day crying. And I just told her, I was like, I just want to create and inspire, but like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. And she just assured me, she's like, that's what you're going to do one day. And like, I think that's where it is a God-shaped dream, because I could have never predicted this is what life would look like, that I would get the honor to write books, or that I would get to use a tool like social media to encourage so many people. But I also think that like I had to, know what it was that I wanted and not be afraid of that, and not believe that God was holding out on me in that respect. But yeah, I think too, letting that dream change over time. Work used to be the most important thing to me. And then I realized that dream had like arms and legs, so to speak, where it was like, well, I want a home, and I want a guest room so that I can have people stay with me and know that like this is a little sanctuary for them, and I want to get married and I want to start a family. And those were things in my early 20s that I was like, Ma, I'll be lucky if I ever want any of those things. And so I think it shifts and changes over time. And the vision has definitely gotten smaller in a sense, which is funny because I think like you almost think it should work in the opposite way, but I find so much contentment and so much joy from the smaller things in my life, like the wrapping of Christmas gifts, or, turning down the lights at night to kind of move into like the second part of the evening. And these are the little things that give me joy. And so, yeah, I guess that would be the God-shaped dream that I'm in. And then coming up next, I mean, I'm always open to be moved wherever it is that I'm supposed to move. But I do think one of the things on the docket that scares me to death is writing fiction. I would love to write a novel or maybe 10. I'm not really sure. But I'm terrified of that dream. That is a dream that is going to take God to do, because nonfiction, you have a certain level of control. You have to stick to the story, the story you're telling. Fiction has a mind of its own. And I think that's both exhilarating, but also kind of like jumping into a really cold pool and like hoping that you can swim. So that's where I'm at with that.
I can feel that right now. There's snow on the ground outside. I can't imagine.
Oh gosh, yes. I'd do anything for snow right now.
Well, Georgia. I want to go back to what you said a minute ago. Your mom, what a great response she gave you, that you will someday. You will do that. Yeah. What a sweet mama you have.
And I thought that every parent was like this. Then you grow up and you realize they're not. But yeah, it's so interesting to think about like both my grandmother, who told me since the age of 6 that I was going to be a writer. I'm not sure why. I don't know what caused her to put that dream inside of me, but she always told me my name was going to be on bookshelves. And I mean, you get like emotional thinking about it, because like you're 6 years old. So like you could be anything that you want to be at that time in your life. But to think now, oh my gosh, like my name is actually on the spines of books. And that's because one person believed that I could do it. And so my grandmother must have passed that to my mom. And I want to pass that to my daughter. Is this just belief that like, if you set your mind to it and you're willing to work really hard, like you can get there. And, that doesn't mean everything's going to be easy or that it's going to work out exactly how you want it to. And sometimes God is going to lead you on a path that like looks even better or more of a fit for you than you thought. But like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm so thankful for my mom instilling that in me at a really young age.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
When you're in college too, because it's like, that probably would be the time when it's like, okay, well, like, but you graduated, welcome to the real world. And she was like, you're going to do that. Yeah, you're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. What insight she had about I do think parents are kind of like, you probably should get a job and support yourself and learn what that's like. But your mom is like, yes, you will inspire and create. And
my mom is a free spirit for sure.
That's sweet. Well, I think it's so helpful to have somebody who will call things out that they see in you. Well, let's talk about you mentioned this fiction writing and that's a place of fear for you. And yet you have done a lot of things, I'm sure, that instilled fear or like, how am I even going to get that first book published? Because this one is your third?
Third, yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've kind of been down this road, but as you said, it's a little bit different to write fiction. So, talk about how, what are you feeling and how do you take that to the Lord and let him have it and walk forward anyway?
I think that's it. I mean, I think it's just what you said is like, okay, like what are the steps that I need to take in order to walk forward in this thing? And one of the things about fear, I don't know, I think I thought for a long time I was going to get to this place where I was going to be like fearless, like the fear would be gone. And it says all over the Bible, like, fear not, don't be afraid. Well, I have not yet gotten to that place where I'm not afraid. I'm a very anxiety prone person. I'll just own it. But I've learned that even though there is fear, I am not going to allow that fear to change the outcome of where and how I'm going to show up. And that's hard. I have to practice that a lot. But I think in this like realm of a dream that scares me, I think about what would I tell somebody else, And I would probably tell them that they just need to start, and they need to start with, 15 minutes at a time. I need to set a timer and I need to write fiction for 15 minutes, because if you told me to write 1,500 words right now, that would feel way too daunting for me. I would always find an excuse to never start. But I have 15 minutes. I just need to do it. And it's so interesting too, because I was talking with a friend and I told her, I was like, I know that this is next. I know that I really feel like I need to at least take a stab at this. And I was like, but I'm so busy right now. I have so many things going on. So this is just not the time for it. And she said, well, what if by doing 15 minutes of this thing, you actually gained time? And she was like, here's something that is really unexpected and a little bit scary, but definitely you're passionate about it. And she's like, what if by adding 15 minutes of your day to work on this thing, you actually felt more capacity and more energy to do these other things that maybe have become a little bit more mundane to you in your daily life? So I've been chewing on that and I have yet to actually start, but I know I need to.
That's really a neat way to think about it, that if there's something that God has planted in your heart, even if you're scared of it, to give it a chance, to give that seed a chance to sprout, that it could invigorate you even more.
Well, because I think too, I think so many of us have these things, like these dreams planted inside of us, right? And they're there for a reason. God knows us. He knows the inner workings of our hearts. And when you get that tiniest glimpse of that thing, or it comes up in conversation, you feel that passion, right? But most of us don't do anything because it feels too big, because we don't know where to start. And it's like, well, what if we just pick the smallest step? I have this perpetual dream of becoming a minimalist, though I have so many clothes. But this is just an example of it, is that I told my husband, I was like, okay, this week we're going to get a bin from Target, and I'm literally going to take all the clothes that don't feel like me, the clothes I've gathered throughout the years based on my own feelings of how, if I was feeling good or feeling bad. I'm going to take everything that I don't wear and I'm going to put it in a bin, and we're going to put it in the attic. And we're just going to get a little bit closer to this dream of like having a very small amount of clothes, you know? And so it's like, I'm not ready to make the leap and throw everything out, but like I could take this one small step to feel more alive. And I think the thing is, we just don't take the step. It's right there and we just don't take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And after 6 to 8 months and you don't want any of those clothes, you haven't even thought about them, it's so much easier to just be like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I mean, I don't want to like turn it on you, but like, do you feel like in seeing people with big dreams every single day, like, do you think that there's just like a hang up on like giving yourself permission to like explore this space?
For sure. Yes. There's so many. I even feel that myself. Like when you start to think about doing something that's even just a little bit, quote, bigger than what you're doing right now, there's this pushback, and it could go both ways. What if I fail? Or what if it actually goes well?
And that's scary too.
It's terrifying. What if it actually goes well? Because I have lived with it for so long in my imagination. And the reality could, is likely to look a little bit different than that. And then it's out of control at that point. I have no control on it.
It's like fiction.
There it is. For sure. Oh, that's great. Well, so encouraging to hear you at a space of, I'm just launching my 3rd book and there's still a fire in me for more. You could be exhausted and burned out and done, but to have your heart open to, okay, God is showing me something else. Let's see what happens.
I love that. Well, and I think too, it's that idea of like, okay, I've seen what's possible. And so there is that fire in me to like keep partnering with God and to see that there's always going to be more. I think a lot of times we live through a scarcity mindset of like, well, if I write this book, that'll be it. I won't have any more books to write. And it's like, no, I feel like when you open up those floodgates, more shows up. And so
for sure.
I'm excited for that more.
Yeah. And I think that's too part of God's mercy. Like he's not going to show us everything all at once. It would be way too overwhelming.
True. We would never move. We would never do anything.
Right. We'd be like, no, I just need a nap. Forget it. I did get a copy of your book, Fighting Forward. And I know there's a contract in there that says, promise me you'll fail. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that would be really helpful too, to those listening.
Yeah. So I wrote a contract that you can rip out of the book if that's what you want to do. I'm not somebody who like rips pages out of the book, so probably just sign the copy or whatever. But yeah, so I created this a few years ago for an intern of mine because I'd worked a lot with interns and I'd realized that being an intern myself and then getting to lead interns, it's a very intimidating space. You're constantly afraid of messing up or not doing the right thing or getting fired from your intern position. And I wanted this intern to know that like she was welcome to fail. She was actually encouraged to fail. Now that doesn't mean like go and mess everything up, but like I've learned in my own journey that on the times that I failed, that is when I've grown. That's when I've developed. That's when I figured out what I've been made of or what maybe I don't want to do ever again. And that experience isn't enough for me to know I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to hurt somebody like that again or make that mistake. And I think that failure can be a really beautiful thing as long as we're willing to look at it from every angle and learn from it. And I mean that in like all aspects of life, failure and successes, that like, if we're not willing to like look and reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, what we could do differently next time, like we're missing out on like this essential growth piece. And so my hope is that people would read that contract and maybe realize they've already failed, and that's great. And they continue to fail because that's where the growth happens.
Yeah. Do you have a story of a failure that you learned something really important from?
Oh gosh.
Not to put you on the spot.
Well, I think back to, okay, here's one. Yes, this one has haunted me, and not like haunted me in a bad way, I remember it. I have taken it to heart every single time that I've thought back on this. Right when I was working a full-time job, this was a year after college, and I wanted to go freelance. I wanted to take on some freelance opportunities, and I had one person that I sent my resume to who came back immediately and was like, hey, like I have somebody who's looking for this position. I think you'd be a fit for it. Like, let me put you in touch with that person. So she put me in touch with the person, and we really hit it off. And I ended up working for her. Because of this woman, I got to quit my full-time job and go freelance. But I did not follow back up with the person that made the connection to say like, hey, I got the job. I know. I'm like shaking my head like, oh gosh. And she actually like came to me and said it. Like, she was just like, hey, like, you didn't follow back up and let me know that you got this position. And I just want to let you know that for like the future. And it has stuck with me ever since. But also like, it's something now I'm on hyper alert for, like when I make a connection for somebody or like I am in that role. And you're right, it does stink to be like, they didn't follow up or like they didn't send a thank you note. And so I try to practice that in my own life. But I look at that and I think, that was a failure. It wasn't the end of the world, but I didn't do it right. And I learned from that. I've grown from that. And I hope because of that, I've helped other people grow and develop because of that. So I wouldn't change it as much as I'm like, oh gosh, what were you thinking, Hannah?
Like, I hate that was me that did that.
Yeah. And like, it wasn't even like, it's not an intentional thing. You just get caught up and you forget. But like, yeah, it taught me a lot, especially her calling me out and just saying like, hey, like this is what it is. And I'm thankful that she did because it grew me up.
Yeah, that's some great boldness too. That's a good leader who's like, hey, I'm not going to let this scoot by. She needs to know.
Yeah. And I feel like I aspire to be that kind of leader. I think I'm still one of those people that's like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. And It's just... I probably need to get like more rigid or something.
Or not. I mean, be who you are.
You're right. I'm very compassionate. If you run me over with a truck, I'll be like, it's okay. I was lying on the ground. It's fine. Maybe that's not so good, but like, that's me.
Yeah. But that's a great example, that story of, I will never let something like this slide again.
Yeah.
You know, had you not experienced that, had she not had the boldness to come back and tell you like, hey, this was a miss. It isn't the end of the world. You're like, okay, I'm going to count that one in my memory for a long time.
Well, and that is something that taught me, like, especially like I write about it in Fighting Forward because I'm really passionate about it. It's this idea of like finishing well. Like we start really well, but we often either don't finish or like we're sloppy with the finish. And I am like, that kind of embedded in me, this desire to finish well. And that means like, even if you're not feeling it, like you don't want to tie up all the loose ends, you should still finish well because people will be there to see you start, but people will also notice and take note of how you finish. And so I'm always trying to make things like come full circle because I don't know. And I think that thank you is like the most understated thing in the world. And we should be saying it to one another way more often.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're making me think like, I probably don't finish very well. I know I don't finish well. That's convicting to me. So that's a good takeaway. Thank you.
Yeah, it's tough. It's not easy. It's like, I'm thinking of all the things I'm in the trenches of right now. And I'm like, I just want to finish, but like, no, you got to finish well. You need to finish every task well. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that like, especially like from small dreams that I had. You know what's okay? This is a crazy story. I don't know. Maybe God just put it on my heart. So I'm just going to share it.
Do it.
If you're cool with that. My first job out of college, that dream job, I think part of the reason why it felt so deflated and like not a good experience is because the person who had been in the position before me left me nothing. Like no, like, hey, here's how you should do it. Hey, here's some files, nothing. And I had come from a small college where like when we would finish a position, we would create this little binder to pass to the next person with the belief that like, you're going to do even better than I did in this position. So here's all the tools that you need. And I remember like being in this job that I just really felt like I didn't get an opportunity to really succeed in and just wanting it to be over. And I was given another job opportunity. And I so badly just wanted to be like, I'm done with this job. I'm moving on. Like they didn't set me up for success. So peace out. And I said, you know what? No, I'm going to finish this thing well. And I like created the flash drive. I made a binder. I built it from scratch. And I remember there were so many moments where I thought, is somebody going to even care about this? Like, am I just doing a ton of work? But like, I knew that I wanted to finish well. Well, what's so crazy is that months later, I was talking with my new boss and she said, like my niece is living in New York City right now. And she has this job opportunity and it's just not going well at all for her. Turns out she had the same job that I had, which makes literal no sense, like at all. But like I had set everything up for her and that had been such a great help for her. But like to an extent, they couldn't really, like they just never really made somebody feel comfortable in that role. But it's so crazy to think I'm sitting there being like, I don't even want to finish well. Come to find out that it's my boss in a completely different realm and space that knows the person that stepped into the shoes next. And I was able to encourage her and help her and show up in that space. But I think it's so important that like we treat every task with care and compassion, even if it's not for us, it's for somebody else that we may never meet.
And that makes me think that, I think before the pandemic, my life was pretty frenzied, like that is the word that comes up. And as you're talking about this, it's like, I was saying yes to a lot of things I probably shouldn't have. And I was overwhelmed and trying to keep all these balls in the air. And so it becomes, even if your intention is, I want to finish well, it becomes impossible to do so if you are stretched in multiple different directions. And so I know that you've got a practice of just having some disciplines in your life and some rhythms and routines that I think would probably be really helpful to people who may be like me and have said yes to too many things or just like maybe aren't as disciplined. So can you talk about that a little bit and what you have that you'd like to offer the listener in that
Totally.
realm?
And I totally come from a space where I used to be so overwhelmed by all the things that I said yes to and didn't really have much margin or boundaries. And like, I'm nowhere near perfect. I'm in a very crazy time myself where I'm like, why did I do this to myself? But there are some practices that I've put into place that have helped me like keep my head above water. And one of the things that's like really important to me is like I start out my week with a plan. I know everything that is going to be on my calendar, what I need to show up for, what I need to prepare for. And I end my week by looking back over the last week and kind of like reflecting. I'm like, okay, what worked? What didn't work? What could we do over again? And I think by having that plan, for me, it's not just about this is the work that I want to get done. I stretch myself to think, okay, like who are the people that God needs me to see this week? What are the things that I can do that are going to look like, moving forward. Otherwise we stay in this like maintenance zone, right? Another thing that we do a lot, like in my business, and I say we a lot, but it's usually me, is that I go back at the times that don't feel like the busiest of times. And instead of using that time and being like, the work is over, I'm never going to work again, there's never going to be a project again, I take that as kind of like a sign from God that I need to go back and like look at the systems that I've built. Like, okay, like what are, like I've got this downtime in order to say, okay, like, let's clean up this email subscriber list, or we've had this task on the to-do list for so long. And I've always said, well, I'm too busy to do it, and that's a time that I think we need to kind of like tighten up the systems, because another rush of frenzy is going to show up. And we're going to be so thankful that we took the time to kind of like oil the machine, and like see what parts are rusty or what parts are working and not working anymore. And then I think too, for me, a lot of it comes down to having boundaries when it comes to social media and how much I'm on my phone. That can be the thing that will take me away from being present, but it's also the thing that will alter the way that I deliver work that I'm creating, right? Because it's like, well, if you're trying to write a piece and then you pull out your phone and you're scrolling while you're writing, like you're allowing the fingerprints of so many other people to get in on your creative process. And so like, I'm somebody who is, I will definitely admit that I'm a true crime junkie. Like I'm an armchair detective, but there was one day that I was looking up, this is so crazy, but this is just me. This is how my brain works. Like, oh, like, like the yellow caution tape that they put around the crime scenes. Like, why do they do that? And I started Googling, and there was something that struck me. Obviously, they put the crime scene tape up because they don't want anything to go out and they don't want anything to come in. But there was one line in an article that says that they do this in order to preserve the integrity of the crime scene. And I felt so convicted in that, because I was like, oh my gosh, am I preserving the integrity of the spaces that I'm creating? Like when I go into the writing room, am I preserving the integrity of that space by not letting anything enter in? And I think, no, I just let everybody come in. I'm like that person on social media, that email, that thing over here. And so it's really caused me to get very focused with the time blocks that I'm working in, and putting my phone into a little box that I keep on my desk, and I don't pull it out again until I've completed the task and the work that I want to create. And I found in that I actually don't need nearly as much time as I thought I did. I just have been multitasking and thinking that was efficiency, when in actuality, it's not.
Right. Oh my gosh. I love that you have a box on your desk for your phone.
Yep. And it says be present. And that is where I continue to learn to be present.
Yeah, that's a great practice. I love it. Okay. So tell us about this tool that you have that you're going to share about overhauling our rhythms and routines so that we can establish some small disciplines too.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an email series. I had so much fun creating this because it's very practical. And so the emails come every couple of days so that you have time to like implement the practice. And really it's for anyone who is just overwhelmed by their rhythms and routines, or maybe lack thereof, right? Like they feel like I don't even have rhythms or routines. And how can we start to build small habits and small disciplines in order to really overhaul your life? I am somebody who I love discipline, because discipline, I've learned, leads to freedom. It makes you so much more free. And so there's nothing to be afraid of. It's something to lean into, because it's going to make all the other areas of your life that much better.
So great. Okay. I'm going to link to that in the show notes. And how many emails did you say it is? 12?
There's 12. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So by the end of January, we could all have some better routines. Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. So Hannah, I want to congratulate you on your book. That's super exciting, and know that it's going to be a resource to those who pick it up, and just encouragement that we would fight forward for our dreams like you've done. So thank you for sharing that story. I would love to have you close us out just thinking about who you were back before you said yes to pursuing the dreams that God's put on your heart, and think about how he has changed you, and how would you kind of summarize that looking back?
Oof, that is a weighty question. I think that before I said yes to the God-shaped dreams, I know that they were always in me, but I think I just lived in this place of thinking, okay, like, well, whatever is around me and whatever the people around me aspire to be, like, that's as good as I'll be, like it was. But I think it was also, coming from a really small town where I think we can so quickly like blame the reason that we're not doing something on our geography, or if I lived here, I would be doing this, or if I had this, I would be doing this, or if I was married, I would be doing this. I think what God taught me in all of that is that like life is not on pause because the circumstances don't look as you want them to look. And also that God's not phased. He's not like, oh, well, you live here and I can only use you if you live here in New York City, And so like that, I think would be like the biggest hope and encouragement that I gained is that like God chose to use me right where I was at. I didn't need to change any of those things in order for the dream to start taking shape. But that was on me to decide, okay, my life is not on pause, and I believe that God can use me wherever I'm at. And so I'm not going to let these things hinder me or hold me back any longer, because in actuality, I was just holding myself back.
Thanks for listening today. Don't let the conversation end here. Let's connect over in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group on Facebook. We're building a sweet community of dreamers, so no one has to walk this road alone. You can find the group at bit.ly/dreamergroup. I'll see you in there.